All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's LinkedIn Live. So, my name is Emma Carpenter. I'm the president of 12 Weeks to Wellness. So, if you're not familiar with us, we're a coaching company providing nutrition and wellness company to Canadian companies and EAP providers for over 20 years now. And so today I have my dear friend and previous colleagues, Dr. Brooke Lyons, with me here. So very excited for our little chat today. And so the topic of self-compassion is one that comes up a lot in our coaching as well, and particularly this time of year, because even though it's a time of New Year's resolutions and grand plans, it also can be really kind of discouraging if you set your goals too high and you tend to fail on those goals. Then it can be a difficult time as well. So it's always a good time to start to just on a self-compassionate note. So, Dr. Brooke Lyons is a registered psychologist in BC and in New Zealand. As a matter of fact, she has over 20 years' experience providing psychological support to a wide range of organizations, including private, government, public sector, and nonprofit organizations. And in addition to her primary passion of leadership assessment and development, she also supports organizations in the area of executive coaching, building a respectful workplace, and resolving conflict. She also participates in various national, international speaking events on the topics of women in leadership and personnel selection and assessment. So we're very excited to have this conversation today. So if we dive right into it, Brooke, what is self-compassion? Why is it so essential to leaders and HR professionals?
Okay, well, first of all, Emma, thank you for having me here. And I want to start with just a personal note about how deeply connected I feel to this topic at a personal level. So about 6 months ago, it'd always been on my radar. I think anyone in this area of work is always out there. But about 6 months ago, I started to do an intentional dive into the topic for my own personal development. And I have to say that it's really opened my eyes. It's really had a huge impact on me. And I see how that's playing out in my professional sphere as well. So I think it is one of those topics that benefits us individually as a human first, but has very real direct benefits to how we show up as leaders and HR professionals as well. So I would say that this is an essential topic for anyone with a heartbeat, but particularly given that leaders and HR professionals, we sometimes have to deal with very sensitive issues, interpersonally sensitive issues, sometimes quite high stakes decisions and quite high emotional content. And we just have these heavy responsibilities a lot of the time as leaders in HR, just looking out for other people's well-being and welfare and professional development. So self-compassion is a really powerful way that we can show up and be well, even when times are really challenging, even when we feel like we've really messed something up, that we're in over our depth, that we're feeling stretched in all directions. It's just a way for us to overcome that and be able to manage those things. So what is compassion? So if you think of that palpable instinct to care, to have concern, to have empathy, and it comes naturally to most of us for other people, but it can be really hard to turn that inwards. There could be a whole bunch of reasons for this. So we're just kind of wired that way. We tend to be much more aware of our flaws and weaknesses than we are of others. So we just feel like there's a spotlight on our deficiencies. Quite often, self-criticism can be a way to take control of a situation. So if we're feeling that things are happening outside our control, by blaming ourselves, it is in some kind of strange way we're regaining that control. That's not the truth, of course, but that's what we think. We also tend to hold ourselves to a higher standard than we do other people. So we might say, yeah, other people make mistakes. Of course, it's human. I don't make a mistake. And sometimes it's because we want to be approved by others. We're afraid of failure. Or maybe we had a caregiver when we were young that was quite controlling and potentially internalized some self-criticism. So there's a whole bunch of reasons why self-compassion is not something that tends to come to us naturally. We do have to be quite intentional and proactive most of the time to cultivate that in ourselves. So if we think about self-compassion leadership, I would say there's kind of three components to it. So the first part is having a non-judgmental awareness of our internal states. So just being very aware of our thoughts, that dialogue, and those emotions. The second part is having an empathetic acceptance of what's going through our minds and understanding our imperfect humanity. And the last part, which is a really key piece, is having thoughtful accountability. So a lot of times people think, or that I've heard over the years, is that by being self-compassionate in some way, we're going to lower our standards. We're going to hold ourselves, we're not going to get as much out of ourselves and out of others if we're too compassionate to ourselves. So I really want to bust that myth and make it very clear that self-compassionate leadership is very much about accountability. It's just the way that we approach accountability is different. So instead of beating ourselves up for everything we're doing wrong, it's instead having a more objective, non-judgmental analysis of what happened, and then coming up with some strategies and ways to improve it, which we'll talk about shortly. But that, in a nutshell, that would be my definition of self-compassionate leadership.
Mm-hmm. And I love that you mentioned about the tough balance there, and that some leaders and people might equate that to that if you're self-compassionate towards others in your leadership practices, then you're a pushover, right? And so really, what is the distinction between the two there, and how are you a self-compassionate leader without being a pushover, and the link to that being holding accountability, right, for that. So can you expand on that and what that looks like more?
Yeah, for sure. So I think I can also talk about how the opposite of self-compassion can kind of hold us back as well, and how that can go against being accountable. And then the flip side, what self-compassion looks like. So the opposite of self-compassion is harsh self-criticism. So ways that we talk to ourselves that are very demeaning and critical. Often we use words or adjectives that we would never say to someone else, but we would say to ourselves. And what happens when we get into that is that we start to become consumed by it. We start to really buy into those things. So let's maybe just take a step back, take a case study or scenario. So let's take Bob, fictional name, and he's recently been passed over for a promotion to a director level. And his response to that being passed over is he's going over every single minute of that interview, what he said, what he did wrong, how he could have done it differently, and what he could have written differently on his cover letter. And that's really sucking all his time and energy and emotions. Obviously, he feels a lot of shame, disappointment, frustration, maybe some sadness and anger. And or we could take another client of mine, different name, Lisa, who's HR, and she sent out an email to a candidate with the wrong candidate's name. And so compromised someone else's anonymity and also showed the candidate that some other people were applying for the role. And her response to that, again, was to, almost catastrophize, say, this is the worst mistake that's ever been done in HR. I'm potentially going to lose my job. I'm going to ruin the reputation of our company. Maybe all these candidates are going to withdraw it. So she really spiraled in a kind of ceaseless spiral of self-flagellation. And so when we do that, we're not actually holding ourselves accountable at all. We're just ruminating on what went wrong. Whereas switching to the accountability piece is having that objective analysis. Okay, what did we do well as what we did wrong? So be more neutral, taking out any of those judgmental words or label words and instead describing what happened. And then saying, okay, what would we have liked to have happened, or what would we hope would happen moving forward, and what needs to be done to get to that point. And also recognizing what is simply outside our control. So for Bob, recognizing the selection decision was ultimately outside his control. He may have turned out a whole bunch of different ways and said a whole bunch of different things and the outcome would have been the same. So going back to that, just a more kind, gentle way of thinking about the way that we showed up, and accepting our imperfections, but not generalizing it to everything about who we are as a person. So really just focusing on that thing that happened, uh, and reminding ourselves of all the things that we've done right, all the qualities that we have, all our hopes and goals, and having this more gentle, supportive way of looking at ourselves.
So taking those same principles then, what does that look like then when we transfer that over to our leadership in managing other people? And what is the effectiveness of that? And how does it impact our relationship, I guess, with our staff? And what are some strategies that leaders can use in order to be able to implement a more self-compassionate leadership style, I guess?
Yeah. So it directly impacts the way that we turn up. So when we have this more gentle, kind way of thinking about ourselves, we are way more present. So when I'm having a talk with my team, I'm not going over everything that I've done wrong. I'm actually being very present and open to what they have to say. So that's a key piece of it. Another piece is what it's doing to our brain. So when we're caught up in that cycle of self-criticism, we're actually just triggering our amygdala, that flight or fight response, and we're kind of dampening our prefrontal cortex where we do our more complicated thinking and analysis. So being able to be gentler and calmer in that moment is helping the blood and the energy go to the right parts of the brain that we need as leaders to make good quality decisions, to be able to think on the fly, to adapt, to adjust, to analyze a situation realistically. And it just helps us with our sleep and our patience, our tolerance, all the things that happen when we're just feeling more emotionally calm and stable. What we model to our team when we're doing this is that we are human first, leader second. So we're relating to that emotional intelligence piece of recognizing we all have emotions and that we are all just doing the best that we can. And when we have that care for ourselves and awareness for ourselves, we're immediately going to be more attuned to that in the people around us. So we're going to recognize what's going on for the team around us with their emotions and how that's impacting them. And we create a psychologically safe culture where people aren't afraid to muck up or make a mistake or tell you if they've made a mistake. They recognize that you're going to support them. But again, not have that lack of accountability. It'd still be like, that's really bad. It was sad that that happened, and I feel for you that you're struggling with this. But this happens. This is life. Let's talk about some strategies to move forward from this. And it's a problem solving, classic looking at mistakes as learning opportunities, mindset where we're curious, we're resolution focused, results focused, as opposed to punitive, harsh, critical, no mistakes ever allowed, no failures ever allowed. And that really enhances the morale of a group, but also, of course, their performance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I love that too about, really that it's about finding solutions and strategizing about what we can do differently instead of just excusing poor performance in a way. So yeah, I think that's super, super helpful. We are out of time. Unfortunately, these 15 minutes go very, very quickly.
They sure do.
So,
Yeah.
so I want to thank you so much again, Brooke, for joining me today. And I want to encourage anyone that was on the call, if you have any questions, please pop them in the chat. We'll see if we have time to address them. And if not, we will get back to you for sure about the answers and directing you to further resources. If you're interested in learning more about coaching for your employees around wellness or specifically self-compassion, please reach out as well. I'll send you all the recording afterwards. And if you're interested in learning more about Brooke's amazing work that she does as well with leaders and assessments and everything, then Brooke, do you want to direct them to your website or LinkedIn as
Yeah.
well?
Bealassociates.ca.
Perfect. Yeah.
And I will be putting up some information on there as well. It's about possible obstacles that can get in the way of self-compassion, particularly the concept of backdraft, which
Yeah.
be another talk for another day, but there'll be some additional information on there.
Yeah. And if you're interested, we did post a couple blogs recently as well on 12weekstowellness.com about self-compassion as well, if you're interested. So thank you everybody for joining us today. And thank you again, Brooke.
My pleasure. Thanks, Emma. Have a good day, everyone.
Yeah, you
Bye.
too. Bye, everybody.